Great. So again, welcome to one of our Salesforce Champion webinars, which we run about 6 or 7 Salesforce Champion webinars a year. And today's Salesforce Champion webinar is each one is focused on helping nonprofits think about how they get the most out of their Salesforce system, or indeed if you're looking at Salesforce, finding out what it can do for you. The presentation I'm sharing today is one that I did at Salesforce World Tour in the nonprofit section just 3 weeks ago. So it was a great event and lots of great sort of information there about Salesforce and all the third-party apps. A lot of nonprofits, when they download Salesforce, kind of go, well, actually, how does this work, and how does it work for service delivery type organisations? And even with I suppose the main offer for Salesforce nonprofits is around the Nonprofit Success Pack. That's quite tailored to donation management. So, lots of organisations may start using Salesforce for fundraising or donor management, but actually it can do a lot more for you than that. And I sort of fell in love with Salesforce when I was running a charity, or a charitable organisation. We're a CIC supporting young people into employment, enterprise and training. And I use Salesforce. I configured it to help us manage 10,000 young people and put them through a whole range of programs, government-funded programs across 5 areas of the UK. So I used to manage a team of coaches who delivered support to young people, and we use Salesforce to basically manage all of that delivery, all of the outputs, track all of the outcomes, use it to report to funders, and pull off all the information. Particularly, we had quite a few payment by results contracts where we had to provide the evidence in order to draw down the funding. And I couldn't have lived without it, quite frankly. It's a great system, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so enthusiastic about it today, really, and helping organisations make the most of it, because seeing how it can be used, I think, opens your eyes and thinks, well, actually, we could do more with it. But incidentally, beyond program management, Salesforce can be used for all sorts of things, from fundraising, HR, to marketing, to campaign management, and all of those disparate bits. So we talk about Salesforce being as your one-stop shop system for an organisation. It truly can be, but today we'll be focusing on program management and using it in that way. So I'll talk through, I suppose, the various aspects, and as you all do, I presume, on this call, is why you're here, is about supporting beneficiaries on their journey and understanding about how you can configure or use Salesforce in the best way to track the data on an individual level. So what are we doing with Joe, and what interactions have we had with somebody, and what information have we got, to then the aggregated level to actually look on a big picture level, which might be on a program or funder level, or even organizational level. So talking about how you can perhaps achieve that. And I will be jumping into the Salesforce system to sort of show some of this narrative as we go through, so you can see it in practice, which I didn't get the opportunity to do actually at the World Tour, so there will be some added value here. So when we talk about program delivery, what are we talking about? What type of information do we capture, or do you indeed capture within, ideally want to see? So we'll talk about programs now. I appreciate all your terminology will be distinct to your organisation, and within Salesforce you can call it whatever you want. But if you might be delivering a program, providing employment support to somebody, and a program could have a specific set of activities to it, which you might want to track. And these, if you like, relate to your outputs. As you can see here, we've got outputs related here. So it might be that you're delivering a number of workshops, or delivering mentoring sessions, or delivering training courses. If you like, it's thinking about what is it that we deliver. What are our different programs, our different services, and what do we deliver on them, and what do we want to track, or how do we want to manage those? And that's the starting point, really. And then you think about the different stakeholders that are involved. And indeed, again, with Salesforce, you want to try and have the big picture of all your stakeholders. So within Salesforce, you don't necessarily just want your beneficiaries of who are receiving the service, but also you want to manage and track your interactions with your volunteers, any partners, referral agencies. So if I looked at Joe and saw everybody who's been involved in Joe's journey and what they've done with them. I get that big picture. And, we work, our baseline sometimes with some of our clients is that they, sort of they operate different systems to do different things, so you don't necessarily get that joined up picture. So it's valuable from a Salesforce perspective to think, well, actually, can we collect all our different stakeholder information within the system, and how do we show their interactions with our programs and with our beneficiaries? So we've kind of got this level of information, and then we're talking about beneficiaries. So what are we tracking here? Well, the baseline is quite often tracked. So people talk about baseline as being perhaps their diagnostic or an assessment or creating a support plan with a client. Again, the benefit of Salesforce is that you build it out to use terminology and collect the information you need, as opposed to trying to use a system that's already been set up and defined. So you're not trying to push yourself into a shoe, you're trying to sort of create what you want. So we quite often build out, if you like, baseline records which show, the starting point. So, whether they're currently unemployed or what their aspirations are, and what their goals are and what the plan of support is going to be. So we collect information around baseline in the system, and again, I'll show you this in a moment and bring it to light. And then you would track sort of the outputs. So this is the delivery with the beneficiary. So if you like, outputs links the activities you're delivering with the actual beneficiaries. And the idea of this is that if I looked at Joe, who's we're supporting into employment, I could see that we've delivered so many hours of mentoring, and he's attended so many different workshops, and that you can actually start to understand the amount of interaction, amount of intervention your beneficiaries are getting at an individual level. But again, as I say, you can aggregate that and look at it as a common trend. And then also in terms of outputs, you can think about referrals. So a lot of our clients find it really useful to think, well, actually, we could track all our referrals in Salesforce. We could track who we're sending our beneficiaries to, and automate that referral process. So if we click refer, it will send an email to that agency and that contact at that agency straight away with the relevant information they need. And also we could have a field in there that sort of tracks perhaps the outcome. So maybe we'll have a reminder to follow up in 2 weeks' time to see actually whether they followed up and met with Joe, and whether they actually maybe got, in this case, housing sorted, for an example. So output information can be in there too. Inputs, so people like to think, well, actually, how much is this actual support costing us, and how can we track our inputs into this actual, beneficiary, or indeed at a program level. So you can start to track the actual financial or indeed in-kind resource, because if you have volunteers on a program, you might want to start to build up a picture of how many volunteer hours are being invested in this program, and to put a financial value against that, you can start to look at the in-kind value. And similarly, maybe not volunteers, but maybe free meeting spaces you're getting, and all of this is really useful either to report back to funders that you've managed to leverage this much in-kind value, or indeed in future funding bids that you might have, you can say you can match fund some of your projects because your volunteer hours normally provide this much match funding. So inputs can be really useful, and again, as I say, can be calculated in the system. I suppose the bit that we're really interested in, and why we do the work that we do at a beneficiary level, is around outcomes and wider impact. So we have a lot of clients that use distance travel type tools, that perhaps look at, Joe, if we keep with the example of Joe, will perhaps grade himself against confidence around, certain competencies at the beginning of the journey with the organisation, support organisation, and then there might be a review of how he feels about his skill set and competencies at 6 months, and maybe one at a year. And at each point you would track the change in that. Or you might track sort of more hard outcomes. So whether they got a job, or whether they achieved a qualification, or whether they completed a training course, some sort of more hard outcomes as opposed to the soft outcomes. So again, the system can enable you to do all of that, and indeed you might have some wider impact sort of collections in there. So if we were to sort of break that down on a beneficiary level, first you've kind of got the information intelligence that you need about a beneficiary. So one, you can understand them, you know, where they've come from, what their goals are, what their demographics are, what their baseline situation is. So Joe is male, referred from the JCP, unemployed at start, no GCSEs, and has an interest in IT. You know, so obviously this is a very simple data collection for the purpose of the case study here, but you know, you want to understand your beneficiaries, because then if you collect data to understand them and have that in one place, you can effectively manage the type of, you know, think about intuitively the type of support they might need. So then it's about tracking the delivery. So what support you delivered, what correspondence you had with them. So that could be any emails, any phone logs, any texts. Again, Salesforce and the system that you have in place ideally wants to track all of the level of interaction. Attainment rate is quite a common one for clients. They want to say, well, okay, did they attend all the training sessions? You know, so here we've got that Joe participated in 100 hours of training. That's what he was scheduled to do. He had 15 hours of mentoring, but actually only attended 85% of the 100 hours training he was committed to do. And as I mentioned before, referrals is quite a common one. And then the achievement area. So here we've got, you know, Joe increased confidence, he gained a qualification, he went into employment, and that was valued at, or, you know, you could draw down from government, which, you know, whichever way your organisation works, £5,000. So this is a sort of data. So I'm just going to click into my org just to show sort of this at a user level. So here I've got Lisa. So if I just click on contacts a moment and just go to the big picture. So I've got Lisa in our system. So I'm in the Lightning version. Some of you who use Salesforce already might be in Classic, which is absolutely fine, but hopefully you've had a start to look at Lightning. With Lightning, you've got the contact record here, and then you've got Related tab and a Details tab. Now, if I click on details, what it does is tell me some static information about Lisa. So ideally on the contact record itself, you want information that's not necessarily going to change in time, i.e. if Lisa in this case joined a program in 2014 and then joined a new program we're delivering in 2017, we might want to collect slightly different data about their baseline situation, because maybe the first time they joined the program they didn't have kids, maybe the second time they did. So you don't want to keep any of that sort of stuff on the contact record, you know, at sort of that level, unless you set up an update to it. So it will automatically update from various other objects in the system, and objects, if we're talking about, you know, different tabs along the top. So in the typical things maybe you're collecting a contact record is, you know, their name, address information. You might have the demographic stuff, which isn't subject to change. Some organisations, depending on their requirements now, might need to keep some of this demographic information separate and anonymous on a separate object. So that's just something to think about, how you perhaps tag demographic information these days. You might track referral information, particularly perhaps where they first came from, but again, referral information can be quite specific to a program rather than on a contact basis, so this is an optional. You might also track, so maybe Lisa in this case started a program to support them into employment, but to support her gaining work experience, she could also volunteer. So here we can see that Lisa, even though she's a beneficiary, could also be a volunteer, because we're hoping that she will gain some experience as a volunteer to help her into work. So you can think about what you collect on a contact record level, but as I say, you kind of need to keep it static, or at least updated automatically if you collect anything that's subject to change. Now in the Related tab, what I can see is everything that, all the interactions that have happened with Lisa across all those things that I've mentioned. So here that I can see that she qualified and she paid for a qualification, or we earned some money through her getting a qualification here. So an opportunity record was created because that's to do with sales. Again, you might not have this related to your organisation, but it's something to think about. We also, in this system, and as I say, the architecture that I'm showing you here is just an example, but in this particular system we've got something called relationships, which shows that Lisa is related to the employment support program as a beneficiary, but she's also involved in the health and wellbeing program as a volunteer. So you can see that there's, she's involved in 2 different relationships and 2 different programs. In terms of campaign history, Salesforce has a campaign object that allows you to track. It's quite commonly used for perhaps events or training workshops or newsletters. So here I can see what campaigns Lisa was involved in, whether that was workshops or newsletters, for example, and her reaction to those. I can see that she's got 2 support plans specific perhaps to those 2 programs. So I've got a support plan here, which is now completed. So I can show you the information that's contained in that in a moment. And then I can see support records, so all the support that she's had, and again we can look at the detail. I can see that we've done various assessments with her, like a baseline and a progression assessment. And then I can see that we referred her to Trafford Housing at some point, and then I can see that actually as a result of all the interventions she had, that she has successfully got a full-time job, that she completed a training course and got the qualification. You also might have feedback forms in here, you might have notes and attachments, and anything else really that you want to build out. So all of these are custom objects that we've built specifically for this client scenario. If I click on a support plan, I see one of these here. So support plan example is what I was talking to about diagnostics, or indeed support plan. So here I can see Lisa's name. So this is where it looks up to Lisa and allows me to see this record under her contact profile. But I'm also relating to a program and a delivery contract, and this is always quite an important breakdown for quite a lot of clients, because it allows them to track funding to so Lisa we know is on this program but is being funded by Cheshire County Council in this case, whereas the Healthy Living program might be a program that's run nationally for this organisation, and they might have different funders. So it allows that breakdown between funder and program. Again, every organisation that we work with to help build Salesforce is different. Then we've got some fields here like assessment information, status, distance travelled, summaries. So we've got the baseline and current sort of change, so the baseline confidence and the current confidence level. And this is pulling information directly from the assessment objects up here. So it's just showing, it's just off the screen. So the assessment object here, every time an assessment's done, it would update the current sort of situation. So this automatically calculates a confidence change or a relationships change. So again, a lot of clients tend to have a summary on the support plan across all their distance travelled indicators and the change, formula change. And then in this example, we've got SMART objectives and desired goals, what they want to achieve. And then in this progression record, again, some of the features that I like about Salesforce is that it allows you to have the roll-up of number of support hours. So this is a formula field which is automatically adding up all the support records. So all of the support records that have been produced are being calculated here, so the value, and then it's telling me the value of that support based on what's in the support record. We'll have a look at that in a minute. So these are all formula fields that are automatically being generated. And similarly with the duration on program, that's a formula field that's looking at the start date versus the discharge date. And what's happening there. And we can also say trigger an evaluation form and also track if the evaluation form has been completed. And this would all again be sort of automation type features that you'd use. Now in terms of support, I can see if I click on related, I can see the support field here. So as I say, the support plan record is looking at all these support records, and I'll click on one as an example, and it's showing it's summarising that Lisa had support from a volunteer, Andy, that it was face-to-face support. it's automatically calculating a value because we've put sort of a formula in here that says Andy's a volunteer, and the support was 3 hours. So it's basically, there's a formula in here that's doing 20 times 3 and calculating the value of in-kind support here. And then Andy, we also set up communities quite a lot, so volunteers can log in and update and write comments against this support. So Andy, as a volunteer, has been able to log in and update that they completed the session, add any notes, so comments here: need support housing urgently, said how long you met. And so there's different ways for volunteers, or team members to actually sort of input this data into the system. And allow sort of either external user access or indeed internal user access. So you'd fill all this record in, and so we've got this the different records here. You can change this view, so you can change the view and what it shows here, but we've got example records here for volunteer support or for training, workshops, and whether they attended that. That's not the volunteer one, so that's not so useful, but you can see the range of different support. And then in terms of other records here, so as an example assessment record, we've got, again, clients give us what their assessment process is, which is maybe distance travelled. So you can hear we've got a score feature tool, and clients quite often make these online forms that people can fill in as an online form, and then the data automatically populates into the system. Or their team members might have a tablet with them and they can input and create a record straight away. So Salesforce, using Salesforce One on a tablet or mobile phone, allows a support worker to immediately just put the score straight in here, rather than relying on Word documents. So you can start to build, start to populate your database through different routes. We've then got sort of simple outcome records. So an outcome record, again, is quite simple here, but it's the client name, date achieved, what the outcome type was. So here we've got various options, what the outcome value was, and again, quite a lot of our clients, we can have like an algorithm type formula that says this was the output, this was the amount, and so it populates the outcome value for you. And all of this information, so once it's built up, as I say, we relate all beneficiaries to programs and and to contracts. What we end up then being able to do is, one, not only as I've shown you on Lisa's record, but to build up sort of the picture, and create a dashboard which shows you all of the types of KPIs that you want to see. Now I'm just going to show you, so the dashboard here, we've got different types of charts. You can have, within obviously what Salesforce offers, a range of different charts and parameters and group information in different ways. So we've kind of got outcomes achieved by month, or values of outcomes achieved, in-kind support offered, so that's a gauge chart, change in IT score, so it's showing the average change here, hours of support by client, so we can see Sammy's only had 1 hour of support, so he's in red, so we've kind of got a RAG status. Outcomes achieved, which is a donut, an employment status at start. And you can have all various different filters and groupings on these graphs. Now, what I encourage is that you would set up maybe an impact dashboard at an organisational level. And because the way that we've structured this particular system, what I can do is go, well, actually, I want to see our impact at the big lottery level. So I'm just going to click on this, and what it's going to do is recalculate all of my graphs to just show me the impact at that that's attributable to that funder. And similarly with Cheshire County Council, again, it will recalculate everything and give me graphs that are very specific for that. And also, if I click on the reports, it will have also narrowed down the reports that are specific to Cheshire County Council and put that filter in there. So that's a very quick way, and one of my key tips really to take away today is use dashboards and filters wherever possible. to help with your impact analytics rather than create hundreds of reports, which quite often tends to happen sometimes, is try and use the filters. Now within Salesforce and the off-the-shelf version you tend to get 3 filters you can have here. So as you can see here, I've chosen referral org or delivery contract, but you might have it by demographics, you might have it by region or borough, London Borough, or whatever your organisation needs to segment. And you can purchase Wave Analytics, which is a more advanced sort of dashboard manipulation tool from Salesforce, which is £600 per year for a user. So you only need it for one user, but it allows you to put many more filters on the dashboards, and to really chop up your data much more. So if you've kind of got a real thirst for monitoring and evaluation, you'd want to sort of perhaps look at Wave as an option. But if I click on clicking on that report, again, for those of you that perhaps not familiar with Salesforce, so I'm just talking to slightly different audiences possibly, is with all these reports you can see it like in this view. You can sort of create, you've got your graphs that you can add in here, but you can export it into Excel or CSV as well, and further manipulate it within Excel if you want to, and share this information. Now some of our clients like using a third-party app called Conga. So if you need to pull in reports or graphs into a document to report to a funder, the best way to do that is to look at something called Conga Composer, which costs just over £1,000 a year. But it allows you to pull information out from Salesforce from lots of different objects, from different graphs, and produce a document and have it set up ready to do that. So that's another tool that you might find useful. So yeah, so that's thing. So somebody just asked a question, can we take screenshots of the presentation? Yes, you can. I'm always conscious with Lightning, it comes out quite small, which is why I didn't screenshot them into the presentation itself. But if you want to, obviously, if you've got the recording, so, please do go through recording and take screenshots if you want. So go back to our presentation. So talking about some of the third-party app tools and where you might be getting data. So one of the things that comes up is that, how do we get data into our system? How, we don't want this to be massively admin intensive. So we talked about, basically, you can create various online forms. Typically, we use like online survey tools to do that integrate into Salesforce. So there's various products on the market: Form Assembly, Fast Forms, ClickTools, Qualtrics, which is the more expensive one, which allow the benefits of these tools and why they exist on the market is they allow you to map data into any Salesforce object that exists. So any of those custom objects you could map the information into, so it goes into there. But also what happens in a lot of cases is if you want to relate the information you're getting on a form back to a contact in the system, you can either email the online form as a URL within an email template and embed, for example, like the contact ID. So when you send out a feedback form to somebody, they get an email with the feedback URL, they click on it, complete the form. When they press submit, the data will come back into Salesforce, create a feedback record, and automatically assign that feedback record to the contact ID and relate it to that contact if that's what you want, obviously. So it allows you to join the data together. So this is quite we advocate this as best practice, as opposed to perhaps people that use something like SurveyMonkey or something that isn't connected to a CRM and the data is all in different silos. So we're really sort of encouraging people to move away from silo operation and having data in different places and it not being joined up, to kind of thinking about what tools can you use that integrate with your system and bring data in. Now, some clients say, well, look, we're offline some of the time. We don't, we don't have Wi-Fi access or 4G access, perhaps because they're working in rural locations or remote access. And there is actually an online form tool. Well, we call it online form, but you can actually access a form that you can complete. And then it syncs when you're back online, and that's another product that you could look at. So you can, get offline form versions, i.e. you're offline when you're not on internet or Wi-Fi. The other way you might get information is through your email system. So, I mean, most people are on Outlook or Gmail. So with Salesforce, you want to be integrating those two. And if an email comes into your Outlook or Gmail account, you can attach it to a contact, or attach it to a case, or attach it to whatever you need to. So email integration is useful. Providing different levels of user access. So your delivery team ideally would have user access, obviously, and they would be able to access it via their Salesforce One on their tablet or mobile, as well as maybe a laptop or computer. But similarly, quite a lot of our clients, as I say, have volunteers or have freelance consultants or coaches, and so you can purchase community licenses. Salesforce community licenses operate at sort of 3 main levels, which are sort of customer plus, and partner. So that is a cheap license price point, which allows you can obviously give secure access to the information they need to see. Now, when we talk about secure access, that could be on a field level, it could be on a record level, i.e. they only see records of beneficiaries that they've been assigned to work with, or they only need to see fields of information that they need to see, so confidentiality you can maintain. So user access, if it makes sense and makes financial sense, give people access that way. If your volunteers, you don't want to give them a login to a system, then you could create an online form for your volunteers to feed back data into your system. That's absolutely fine. The downside of that is they can't see any existing information, and they can't see what they submitted. So if you want any sort of stakeholders to be able to see information and update it, then you're looking at sort of the range of license types that are available. Other types of interactions that you might have is SMS, text messaging. So that's, again, becoming increasingly popular, which might be about reminding people about appointments, or asking for feedback. So you can get SMS integrations and, again, capture that data in Salesforce. You might do web chat functionality. So web chat is really good for IAG type services, and if people are coming to your website as for sources of information, and you're a support line in that way. So you might have a web chat functionality that pops up a window and say, hi, we see you're looking, are you looking for help today? Can we help you? And if you use a web chat that integrates with Salesforce, of which there are a few, you can capture all of those web chat conversations back into Salesforce. So again, you retain all of that information. And similarly with social media, again, it depends on an organization level whether you do social media interaction with beneficiaries or your stakeholders, and whether you need to record those conversations that you have back in Salesforce. So, I mean, I'm sure there's more things. There's event management, tools that you might collect data through. There's might have e-marketing tools that you collect data through. So your first task, really, if you're embarking on thinking about Salesforce, is to do a bit of an information audit and look at where do you collect data from? Where does data come from, or how would we, and think about, well, how would we like data to come into Salesforce, or the system you choose to kind of be more streamlined. So that's just something to think about there. So just I jumped ahead with my demo, but you can see a dashboard here, and I've shown you how the dashboard works in terms of impact analytics. The tips that I provided for around the dashboards is, get your filters on the dashboard to give you the global view, as well as, being able to look at program specific or contract funder view, and think about wave analytics if that's something of interest. Another feature of Salesforce is something called snapshot reporting. And the thing is with Salesforce is you might always be updating information, and that might overwrite some values. So some organizations find it quite useful to have a basically you can use something called snapshot reporting, which almost takes a stamp mark of some values and puts it in an object. So you can say on this date this was the value, and you might have a snapshot data dump every month, so you can see the change in values every month, and it's retained. You've got that historic data, so that can be useful in some circumstances with some of our clients for program management, and particularly impact reporting to snapshot it is a case-by-case basis. The other is also buckets and formula functionality in reporting. So buckets are, if you're collecting age groups, sorry, date of birth, with buckets, you can create age groups quite easily. So you might want to say, well, actually, let's look at the trends for under 16s and 16 to 30 and 30 to 50 and 50 plus. And you can use bucket to group the information within it and to present that into a report. So that's how sort of buckets work. And similarly with formulas, you can use it to summarize information within the report and create you a different value set. So it is on a case-by-case basis, but some of the other things to sort of think about. So in terms of some examples to share with you, Uprising has been one of our clients for the last 2 years, and they work with about 2,000 young people a year. So they embedded Salesforce particularly to manage program delivery. That was their first priority. So they deliver programs across the UK in different areas. They manage young people, they manage volunteers as mentors as well as coaches. They manage, and sort of manage that whole process from a young person applying to a program. So they use ClickTools to be their online form tool. And so young people apply through an online form. That data comes into Salesforce. And then they assess it, they approve them coming on the program, they track all their delivery against the different workshops they've attended, they track which coaches and mentors have been assigned to them, and the feedback from all of those different three parties. They collect feedback and outcomes from the volunteer, the coach, and the young person. And they produce reports from that data. One of the key things I think they really loved and to emphasize here is also it's not just about tracking for this program. They wanted, when you move from a spreadsheet, it's about to a CRM, it's about a client relationship management system, and it's about the relationship ongoing. So they really wanted to put more value on their relationship with the young person. So a young person takes part in one program, but then they have evolved to, do work, support alumni in different way. So they want to look at the alumni contribution and then alumni involvement. They want to see whether these young people have become speakers in the future or whether they've progressed onto leadership positions. And to really maintain a relationship with all of their stakeholders for the long term beyond just a program that they were on for, whatever the timescale is, 6 months, for example. So, again, for a business case is about relationship management for the long term and maintaining those relationships. So that was a real, real sort of key priority for Uprising. With Joe Cervical Cancer Trust, again, we've been working with them for a couple of years now. Initially, they started actually using Salesforce within their fundraising team, and they're also using it for their case management. So they have a help support line. But recently, they won 3 years of funding to eradicate cervical cancer, which is a campaign that they're delivering across the UK. And this consists of like a roadshow, where they'll take out the roadshow across the UK. They're running outreach workshops, they're visiting GP surgeries, and we've worked with them on figuring out what they track, because at Techonomic Change we look at impact measurement KPIs, what you're tracking, and help you think through that, think through the impact measurement process as well as Salesforce and building Salesforce out. So we work with them thinking through what all the outputs and outcomes we're tracking. We've then translated that into creating monitoring tools and looking at, what the monitoring tools are that all the outreach workers should be and volunteers should be completing during the roadshows, all their outreach work at groups and GP surgeries. So they use Form Assembly as their tool to collect information from external stakeholders and put that into Salesforce. And we're working with them on setting up all their dashboards to track all of their interactions. So far the roadshow's been the big party, but all their outreach work is now starting to take form, and so we're setting it all up to manage all of those different areas. So overall, the campaign hopes to reach 17,000, just over 17,000 people across the UK, and the system has been set up to track, as I say, all of the delivery as well as all the outputs and all of some of the outcome information that is being collected around, the differences. In terms of the Shore Trust, again, we've worked with them for just over a year and a half, and they really wanted to set up a volunteer community. So they wanted to ramp up their volunteering and have a system and process to really support their volunteers. So we actually set up a Salesforce community for them, allowing their volunteers to log in and update their availability, because it's very much like a rota management system. So volunteers log in, can update their availability, but can also log in and update the work that they've done with their beneficiaries. So, for example, they have employability hubs. The volunteer will say, well, I'm available every Monday for an afternoon to come and meet people who are unemployed. So the volunteer will log in and provide that availability, but will also log in and say who they met and what the outcomes were. At an anonymous level, actually, within this system, because they do keep their beneficiary information somewhere else. But they use the whole system for empowering their volunteers and reducing the admin for them internally in terms of managing volunteers and being able to scale up, because they want to use volunteers across all of their different types of services, that their employee hubs, skills, charity shops, and social enterprises. So they sort of have evolved that. They've also done, they use form assembly to help with their volunteer application forms as well. So these are people that don't yet have a community license. So that's just really helps sort of track all of that information and understand again who their volunteers are, but also what their volunteers are doing, and being able to sort of report on all of that. So overall, the benefits that quite a lot of our clients see when we work with them is, one, improved security, because they are empowering stakeholders to have access to a system. There's not data silos where people are relying on spreadsheets or things going back and forth in emails. It's all in one system, and anybody who needs access has access to it. So it is about data protection, but also security of that information. And confidentiality. We very much advocate real-time analytics. It obviously does depend on how people use the system. So we very much advocate that people input data into the system real time and use it for their day-to-day beneficiary management. So you will have real-time analytics if people do that. So that's just something to think about. In terms of the teamwork, if everybody has access to the system and can see what's going on, you can improve teamwork with colleagues, because if somebody's on holiday or somebody's off sick, or indeed somebody leaves, you've got clarity about what's happened with people before, so you can see the history there. And also, improve relationships with your stakeholders. I really advocate this to, call handling. If we ring up our bank or telephone, mobile phone company, we expect people to be able to see on the system who last spoke to me when, and what that discussion was about, and for that history to be there. So charities can benefit from having a system that empowers them to have the same. That if everything is tracked, you can collect that level of data, and you can provide the same level of customer service to your customers as we would probably normally expect from other companies that we deal with. So there's some of the benefits, and overall, I guess from a financial point of view is, if you've got a good system in place, it can definitely help you. It provides confidence to funders, so it can help you secure more funding, or indeed keep your funding, because it doesn't take you days to report back to a funder. You can see it, touch a button, and I've seen definite evidence where commissioners have chosen clients with using Salesforce because they've seen Salesforce, because they've seen the level of depth of data management that will be put into place. And indeed, some funders can be given access to the dashboard, so they can see the real-time analytics, which is about providing 100% transparency about what's going on. It can definitely give you an advantage to help secure funding, because, as I say, funders like to see this level of information. So, that's sort of it in a nutshell. I've got some questions here that I can sort of address. So, name of the online form. So, people mentioned the name of the online form. I think it's escaped me at the moment. I can't think of it. I know what it is, but I can't. It's just escaped me. So I'll have to you'll have to email me about that one. But it's on the App Exchange. If you type in offline form in the App Exchange, you'll find it. It's one that's there. Um, so yeah, somebody else mentioned the offline form. So thank you, Robert. So Robert's also mentioned the event app is really free and it's free on Salesforce Labs and fantastic. So basic event management tools, that's great, Rob. Thank you very much for that insight. So I guess with any app, I'd always say, don't jump into an app. Quite often it's about looking at what data you need to collect and think about which apps suit your best and appraising them. So that's certainly an app, but there's various event apps that you might use. So quite a lot of our clients use Eventbrite, and will integrate Eventbrite into Salesforce, or they'll create the online forms, like using some of the online form tools we've talked about, like Form Assembly, and actually use that, and then you sort of use the campaign object in Salesforce for some of those things. So there's certainly different ways to do it. Some of our clients have invested in Linvio, which is an event management tool, but it very much lends itself to more conference type facilities, and multiple workshops. So it's more of a complex tool than maybe the free event app. So there's lots of options. I think the benefit of Salesforce is you have so many apps out there, and able to sort of move it through, sort of enable it to do everything you need to do. So reading through the questions. So somebody's asked me to say a bit more about data input through Form Assembly and compare it with what we could be done through using communities for input. So the difference between Form Assembly and communities. Well, Form Assembly is literally a data input, predominantly. I mean, you're about capturing data and it going one way. With community login, it's more about people being able to log in and see records and some information about their beneficiaries, as well as inputting information. And the other benefit about communities is that you can use the chatter functionality. So in the case of the Shore Trust, they're using chatter and chatter groups, so volunteers can actually connect, talk to each other and can have peer groups and connect. And I think it's really powerful for volunteers to be able to share ideas or connections, because you ramp up the value of that volunteering so much more. So if Andy, my example volunteer, had gone to meet Lisa at Job Centre and Lisa's saying, I want a job in marketing, can anybody help? Andy could go back into the volunteer community and put it on Chatter and say, hey, I'm supporting somebody who's looking for a job in marketing, in the West London area. Does anybody live there or know of any opportunities? And you can really harness the power of that community and those volunteers beyond just that person. So community, adds so much more value, which is, one of the cost benefits, right? You can actually provide peer support to your volunteers. You can provide a file resourcing area for your volunteers, so you can have all your volunteer manuals in there as well, and as well as giving them access to any related records or rota management systems that you need. So yeah, all of that can work. Rosie said, we work with 350 service users a year. Can you tell me how affordable it is to implement Salesforce? It sounds like it's just what we'd be looking for. So Salesforce is scalable. The cost of implementation is really around how much it needs to be customized to your use. So as you could see when I was working through the demo, all those different fields, and the reports you have is a cost in terms of implementation. So when we work with clients, from a consultation point of view, we'll sit down with you and say, right, what data are we tracking? What do we need to build out? We'll then count all the number of fields up, think about any automation, and sort of say, well, to build all of this out, it's going to take this amount of time, and that's really what gives you the price for implementation. In terms of user licenses, Salesforce, if you're a charity or a non-profit, you can apply for the 10 free user licenses from Salesforce, and then you can apply for additional licenses. Now, additional licenses could range from the most common one, £350 is the the one that most people get if you need a system admin access, i.e. people need to get into the back end of the system and need to be able to do everything. There is one above that which is unlimited at 600. But if you need to go down, your members of staff need less access, there's 2 levels of employee app license, which are almost community licenses, they're called, sort of employee community licenses. There's an employee starter license, an employee plus license, as well as the other community licenses we're talking about, customer, customer plus, and partner, which range quite substantial, difference in price. So you could be talking for an employee starter license is £60 per year, approximately, and £180 for employee plus. And then the customer community licenses are £12 per user, or you can, with the customer plus, and partner, you can either buy per user or you can buy per login, so depending on how many logins you might have a month. So you can contact me around pricing and I can introduce you to a Salesforce AE and talk about pricing in more detail. But it's not, quite often you need to think about your configuration of your system and think about what objects you'll use. And how it might be laid out to really get clarity around the pricing. Like the architecture of the system massively influences the license types you would need. So it's not a straightforward process of saying, well, the licenses are going to cost you this much. There is, you need to kind of get a feel for the architecture as well as you need to get a feel for the architecture before you can really sort of think about the licenses. So that's something, as I say, we can support. So David, you also mentioned about the cost of purchase and how much it costs and to configure and modify the system. So, ongoing, just to add to what I've said there, 95% of our clients become self-sustaining. We work with volunteer managers, fundraising managers, program managers, and they become the Salesforce admin. You don't need somebody techie. IT sort of background necessarily to become a Salesforce administrator. And by a Salesforce administrator, I mean somebody who can go into the back end of the system and update field values, create new fields, create new record types. I would advocate getting a consultant to help you with the initial architecture, because as you can hopefully see from the presentation today, we have quite a lot of experience, and I've personally overseen over 100 implementations. We learn such a lot. We understand. We want to gather what your needs are and help you configure the system and make the most of it. So, we quite often go into orgs where they've tried to do it themselves and then they need to rehash it because they're not aware of a lot of what's possible. So it's worth spending a bit of money up front. As I say, the design will influence the license costs, and so until you've got an idea around the design of the system, it's hard to actually anticipate what the licenses might cost you. So if I was to have an initial call with you and work out what you need, I'd probably be able to suggest whether you'll need the full licenses or whether you could get some of the cheaper employee licenses. I could certainly sort of anticipate we can anticipate some of that through just an initial consultation and give you an idea. So as I say, hopefully somebody in your org can become self-sustaining. We find that where organisations don't want to be self-sustaining, you can rely on a consultancy to provide continued Salesforce admin support, or we provide certainly a mentoring package, so we can mentor a Salesforce admin and make sure that they are supported and we build their capacity to manage things. So rather than do things for you and update things, we can train them in how to do things. And so we are constantly sharing that knowledge. And we use something like GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting, because then we can record those training sessions with your Salesforce admin and retain them. So if that person leaves, you've still got a library of recordings that you can rely on. The other thing to think about in terms of ongoing is if you've got an internal Salesforce admin, then they can continue to modify the system going forward. And so Salesforce offer amazing discounts to non-profits for the features you get. And the range of options there, and certainly all the third-party apps that we've talked about give you that diversity and range. And I would say no one of the systems I've done has ever been the same. We have never cloned one system for one client and cloned it somewhere else. It's impossible to do. Every system is built to meet client requirements and what they need. and we appraise third-party apps. So we would not necessarily recommend one straight away because we'd understand what your needs are and then sort of suggest which ones are the best apps, because everybody has different situations. So, it's worth taking it's something you kind of need to think about, and sort of plan. In terms of the mentoring, another question here, no, but more about the mentoring program for Salesforce admins. So, yeah, in terms of mentoring, our role is just really, if you had somebody in house who says, well, how do we do this, or how do we do that, or one of your team's asking you to do something, you can book in time with one of our team to kind of just talk that through and shadow, or we talk you through how to do something. So we're consistently sort of trying to transfer that knowledge over to our client base, and support them. And also in the mentoring, we find that as consultants, we come in and help with perhaps upward management and sort of getting buy-in from management teams. I suppose our role as consultants is, again, we can share best practice and knowledge from other sort of scenarios and use that to come in and help leverage resource or investment, or executive sponsorship for Salesforce investment. And so we tend to work alongside internal Salesforce admins to help them facilitate design days, facilitate requirements, and then we support them to implement those changes. So going back to your question, David, around costs, you can have a Salesforce admin who can be cheaper than using a consultancy who gets trained up either through Salesforce admin courses that Salesforce run, or through doing that. And I would say with the Salesforce admin, you don't necessarily need somebody full time. Like it in almost all cases, it either becomes part of somebody else's role and they become a Salesforce admin accidentally, and find a new career route, or we at Economic Change, we train mums to be Salesforce administrators. So we run a Salesforce Super Mums program, and so we've been placing our mums into part-time roles within organisations. So they spend 6 months on the training program where they get to work on a project, and we offer discounts for projects that take trainees. So that's something you can talk to us about, because they don't, the mum volunteers, but before they volunteer they do 3 months training and practice, and then when they graduate we place them into job roles. So if you need a part-time person, then definitely talk to us as well, because we might be able to assist with that, to help, sort of mums want flexible roles, whether that's part-time or remote working, or various different scenarios. So I would say you probably don't need to budget for somebody full-time. You don't need a full-time Salesforce admin unless it's a full-time job, and it's a very complex system. So we're nearly at 2. Any other questions? Or hopefully that's been useful today. As I say, I will send out you will get a recording. I will send out the PowerPoint with my email address, so you can come back to me with any other information, or if you want to book a free consultation, please do. Otherwise, depending on whether you opted in or not, we'll continue to tell you about future Salesforce Champion events. If you opted out initially but would like to sort of come back to us, then you can always sign up to our newsletter, and we can keep you abreast of all the interesting things that we've got going on. But hopefully that's been a useful insight into Salesforce for Program Management. I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to join the call, and thank you very much for your questions. That's great. Glad you enjoyed it. Glad you found it valuable from all your comments. That's brilliant. And yeah, good luck with your Salesforce implementation, and hope to speak to you all again. All right. Thanks very much. Take care.